Human beings have invented machines that can harvest a field in hours, cross continents overnight, manufacture thousands of objects a minute, and send information around the planet almost instantly. And somehow, we still don't have enough time. That is a strange outcome. For thousands of years, nearly every major invention promised to save human labor. Yet today, millions of people organize their lives around alarms, calendars, deadlines, shifts, notifications, and the uncomfortable feeling that they should probably be doing something productive. So there is a question hiding underneath modern civilization. If technology saves so much labor, why are we still so busy? To answer that, we have to visit a world where Monday doesn't exist. There is no weekend, no salary, no retirement, and perhaps strangest of all, nobody can tell you that you're late. For almost the entire existence of Homo sapiens, humans lived without anything resembling a modern job. But that doesn't mean they spent every waking hour desperately fighting starvation. In fact, when anthropologists began measuring the lives of some hunter-gatherer communities, they encountered something that challenged one of civilization's oldest assumptions. Survival didn't always consume the day. Among the Juhuwansi of southern Africa, research famously suggested that obtaining food could occupy surprisingly little time compared with a modern workweek. Later studies of hunter-gatherer communities complicated the exact numbers. Gathering firewood, preparing food, repairing tools, caring for children, and other necessary activities also take time.
So prehistoric life was certainly not a permanent vacation, but the important discovery survived. Human beings can live without dividing most of their waking lives into something called work. And once you understand that, the archaeological record begins to look very different. Because buried in ancient caves are objects that shouldn't exist in a world where every minute was consumed by survival. A flute. More than 35,000 years ago, someone in Ice Age Europe took the hollow bone of a bird and carefully transformed it into a musical instrument. Think about everything hidden inside that object. First, somebody had to know that different holes could produce different notes. Then they had to shape the bone without destroying it. They had to practice. And eventually, somebody played it while other people listened.
None of this puts more meat on the fire. Music doesn't stop a predator. A melody can't keep you warm. Yet humans were making instruments while mammoths still walked across Europe. And music wasn't the exception. In South Africa, archaeologists discovered pierced shells associated with humans living tens of thousands of years earlier still. Tiny objects. Enormous implication. Someone collected them. Someone altered them. Someone apparently wore or displayed them. In other words, some of the earliest evidence for recognizably human behavior isn't simply about staying alive. It's about caring what things mean. Then there are the caves. Deep underground, beyond the reach of ordinary daylight, prehistoric artists painted lions, horses, rhinoceroses, bison, hands, and mysterious symbols. Some images were placed where nobody casually passing by could ever see them.
To create them, people entered darkness carrying illumination and materials. They spent valuable time making images. Why? Religion? Storytelling? Ritual? Teaching? Entertainment? We don't know. And that uncertainty is precisely what makes the painting so important. A creature obsessed only with calories doesn't decorate the darkness. Humans were doing something else. They were creating culture. Which means the classic picture of prehistoric life, wake up, avoid death, find food, sleep, repeat, is missing most of the story. A prehistoric camp wasn't merely a survival station. It was a social world. Children had to learn. Tools had to be repaired. Food had to be shared. Arguments had to be resolved. Relationships had to be maintained. People flirted, joked, complained, played, taught, remembered, and gossiped. And gossip may have been more important than it sounds. In a small mobile community, there is no supermarket waiting if today's hunt fails. Your insurance policy is other people. One day, your family may have food. Another day, someone else's does. Sharing reduces the danger created by unpredictable hunting and gathering. That means trust becomes a survival technology. Being connected to other people isn't something you squeeze into Saturday evening after finishing the important part of life. It is the important part. And this may explain one of the strangest findings about life around the fire. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner studied conversations among Jew-Hawansi communities and found a striking change after darkness. Daytime conversations leaned toward practical matters and social regulation. But when night arrived and people gathered around fires, storytelling became far more prominent.
The physical environment had changed. You couldn't gather plants in darkness. You couldn't repair everything indefinitely. Movement became limited. So the fire created a different kind of space. People told stories. They talked about other people and distant places. They performed. They imagined. For thousands upon thousands of generations, the end of the productive day didn't necessarily mean entertainment consumed alone through a screen. It meant faces illuminated by fire. And stories may have been doing invisible work. A good story can teach children what happens when someone breaks a rule. It can preserve knowledge without writing. It can explain where a group believes it came from. It can turn dead ancestors into characters who remain socially present generations later. The campfire wasn't just entertainment. It may have been one of humanity's first classrooms, theaters, and archives combined. But none of this means prehistoric life was easy. That would be replacing one myth with another. Hunter-gatherers faced injuries without modern surgery, infections without antibiotics, dangerous childbirth, violence, parasites, drought, accidents, and periods of hunger. Infant mortality could be devastating. A broken bone could become a catastrophe. There was no emergency room waiting over the hill.
The surprising part isn't that ancient humans had a better life. It's that their hardships were organized differently, and their bodies preserve evidence of what happened when that organization changed. Around 12,000 years ago, in several parts of the world over time, humans began relying increasingly on domesticated plants and animals. At first, farming looks like one of history's greatest bargains. Instead of searching for food, grow it. Instead of following animals, keep them nearby. Instead of depending entirely on what nature happens to provide, produce a surplus. It sounds like humanity had finally defeated uncertainty. Then something unexpected happened. In many early farming populations, health got worse. Archaeologists examining ancient skeletons have found evidence in various regions of shorter stature, nutritional stress, dental problems, and disease following transitions toward agriculture. Why would people producing more food become less healthy? Because more food and better diet are not the same thing. A foraging population can eat many species of plants and animals. An agricultural settlement may depend heavily on a handful of staple crops. If those crops are rich in carbohydrates but limited in other nutrients, calories can increase while nutritional diversity decreases. Then there is density. Hunter-gatherers generally lived in relatively small populations. Agriculture allowed far more people to occupy the same area. That sounds like progress until you remember what happens when humans, waste, and domesticated animals begin living close together.
Disease gets an opportunity. Permanent settlements also create something nomadic groups have less of: accumulated property. A field can't walk away. Stored grain can be counted. Land can be defended. Harvests can be seized. And suddenly, controlling resources becomes far more powerful. Agriculture didn't merely change what humans ate, it changed what could be owned. And once food could be stored, another possibility appeared. Someone could control the surplus without personally producing all of it. Now, the story accelerates. Larger food supplies support larger populations. Larger populations allow specialization. Some people farm, others make pottery, others work metal, others trade, others fight,
Others administer. Others perform religious functions. Settlements become towns. Towns become cities. Cities require coordination. Coordination requires rules. And eventually, human beings encounter something their distant ancestors rarely experienced in the same form. Other people controlling enormous portions of their time.
But even then, the modern workday had not fully arrived. For most agricultural history, work remained heavily influenced by seasons and daylight. Harvest could be brutally demanding. Winter could be comparatively quiet. Certain tasks were governed by weather rather than minutes. Then humans invented a machine that changed the meaning of an hour. The mechanical clock. Early clocks were crude by modern standards, but they helped transform time from something experienced into something increasingly measured. Sunrise is an event. An hour is a unit. And units can be counted. Once time can be counted precisely, it can also be priced. That mattered enormously when industrialization arrived. Inside a factory, the sun no longer determines the entire rhythm of work. Machines do. Workers have to arrive together. Production has to coordinate. Shifts need beginnings and endings. Minutes become economically valuable. Being late acquires a new power. The clock moves from towers to factories to pockets to wrists and eventually onto the glowing rectangle most of us check moments after waking. The transformation is so complete that we barely notice it. A person can now feel guilty while resting.
Think about how strange that is. Nothing is attacking you. Nobody is starving. There may be no immediate task that actually needs to happen. Yet sitting still can produce the sensation that something is wrong. You should answer that message. Clean something. Learn something. Exercise. Build something. Earn something. Improve yourself. Even leisure can become another project requiring optimization. Books become reading targets. Walking becomes step counts. Sleep becomes a score. Hobbies become side hustles. And suddenly the machine that once measured work begins measuring almost everything. This is where comparing ourselves with hunter-gatherers becomes genuinely useful. Not because we should abandon cities and return to caves. Modern civilization has produced extraordinary advantages. Vaccines, sanitation, modern medicine, mass literacy, global communication, reliable food systems for billions of people. Ancient life contained dangers most modern people would never voluntarily accept.
The lesson is subtler. For most of human history, usefulness was not necessarily measured in hourly output. A conversation could matter without producing anything. Making an ornament could matter. Telling a story could matter. Playing with children could matter. Sitting beside a fire could matter. And perhaps that is why modern life can feel strangely unsatisfying, even when it is materially comfortable. Our civilization became astonishingly good at asking, how much can we produce? But humans evolved inside communities that also had to ask, who can I trust? What does this mean? Who are we? What story will we tell tonight? Technology solved problems our ancestors couldn't solve, but it also gave us the ability to fill nearly every empty moment. There was always another email, another video, another task, another notification, another opportunity to become slightly more productive than we were yesterday. And that brings us back to the original contradiction. Humanity spent thousands of years inventing ways to save time. Then we built a civilization capable of consuming every second we saved. Maybe the most radical thing about our ancestors wasn't that they supposedly worked less. It's that not every hour needed to prove its value. For most of human existence, there were no productivity apps tracking the day, no career ladder explaining whether you were moving upward, no glowing clock telling you that you're wasting time. There were simply needs, people, seasons, dangers, skills, stories, and long stretches of ordinary human existence between them. We cannot return to that world, and most of us wouldn't want to.
But the people who lived there left something behind besides bones, tools, and paintings. They left evidence that human beings were creating music before there were salaries, making art before there were markets, telling stories before there were books, investing enormous amounts of time in relationships before anyone called it networking.
Civilization changed almost everything around us. It may not have changed what makes a human life feel meaningful. And perhaps that's the real reason modern people can have machines doing the work of thousands of ancestors and still feel as though there is never enough time. The problem may not be that we failed to save it. It may be that somewhere along the way, we forgot what we were saving it for.